Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today I have James Dudley of James Dudley Guided Hunts on the other end of the line. The last time I talked to you on a podcast, James, you had killed a big giant buck. I believe two seasons ago in 2015. You killed a big giant Coues deer buck, beautiful big buck, velvet buck. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good, Jay. How are you?
Good. I know you've been traveling around with your day job, traveling all over the country, and your job allows you to work a lot, but it also allows you to have some nice time off. Last time we talked, you had killed that big, beautiful buck with your bow and arrow, and I had the privilege of seemed like a month or so after that, or maybe more, meeting up with you and getting to see that buck in person. Just a beautiful buck. Where's that buck at now?
Yeah, so I have that buck displayed over at Arizona Archery Club. One of my buddies is the co-owner, Daniel Willett, over there, and so I figured I'd set it over there so people can see it instead of just putting it in my house. So
Instead of
I just
hoarding it.
yeah, instead of hoarding it, and it gives me a reason to go over there and shoot my bow a couple times a week. So that's where it's at right now.
Good for you. That buck, if I remember, that was like a 120 some inch buck. What did that buck end up scoring, or did you ever have it scored?
Yeah, so I had your buddy Brian Rimsa score it for me after I had it freeze dried and mounted and everything. I took it over there and it ended up grossing just under 130. And yeah, I was actually that's funny that you asked that in the freeze dryer how light it was and then how much it actually shrunk the antlers. There's a lot of water and stuff in those antlers that I never
Oh,
knew
for
was going to
sure.
happen. So when I took it to you, I don't know if you remember, but it was really light. They sucked all that
Yeah.
water out and it kind of shrinks it a little bit.
Yeah, it's I just got my Muley Crazy magazine, and there was an article in there from by Ryan Hatch, and he made some really good points. And one of the points was, velvet bucks that are shot, or the antlers are full of blood and they're still growing. And it is amazing to see the difference. In your case, when you got your velvet freeze dried, how much shrinks from the original position that it was or the size that it was. And in no way does that mean that your buck isn't a giant buck. I mean, a buck in the 130s is everybody's dream, for sure. And regardless of score, it doesn't even matter. That's a giant buck in anybody's book. I remember the story of that buck, and uh, you're a Coues deer fanatic, a lot like myself. Um, and one thing I would ask you, that buck is, a buck of a lifetime. How hard is it now that you shot that buck? Has it increased your desire to go find other giant bucks more, or has it deflated you in a way that it's like, golly, I'll probably never beat that ever again? Curious, curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think that I can still go out there and find giant Coues deer. Will I ever find one that big again? I mean, I hope so. I think so. Even when I killed that buck, I told Trevor that this wasn't going to be the once in a lifetime buck that everyone says it is. I still think I know there's bigger deer out there. So we both try to go find those big deer all the time. We've got a couple good deer we've been watching for a few years, and I mean, I never that it didn't deflate me at all. The one thing it did do is make me focus on getting a giant mule deer to match him. So I just put in for my all my points are going to the strip from now on, and that makes it easy.
Nice. Are you gonna do the archery strip tag?
um, This year I did not put in for that hunt. I just put in for the rifle hunt just because I'm going to be pretty busy during that early archery deer season already. And I didn't want to find out, kind of last minute that, oh yeah, you got this archery strip tag and take away from some of the other stuff that I already have planned.
Yeah, it's one of those things, when you get a tag like that, you'd like to be able to focus and put all your attention
Yeah,
into it for sure. Um,
exactly.
Now I know you guys, you've got some archery elk hunters. Tell me a little bit about what you've got already planned for this fall, and how are things looking? What is your outlook, etc.
Yeah, so for this fall, we've got 3 archery elk tags um, that I've just been hammering the hills right now, trying to scout for, and then a couple late season archery bull tags also, and then one late season rifle bull tag. So we're going to be busy with bulls this year, and that's the way I like it. So, um, yeah, I'm excited about elk this year.
Cool. What units are you going to be focusing on this fall for elk the most?
We got tags in Unit 8, 22, and 21. So kind of spread out a little bit, but with all this moisture that we've been getting, it's I know it's going to be a good year for elk, so I'm really excited for that.
Good. How is it looking out there in those units, specifically each one? Does any one look better than the other? Kind of give me your forecast or your prognosis on the feed and maybe compare it to other years. You know, Number one is which one looks the best. Number two is how do they compare from other years?
Okay. Yeah, for me, by far, Unit 8 is looking like it's going to be awesome this year. It seems like every couple days they've been getting rain throughout the entire year so far. So once that snow melted, they just kept getting rain showers nonstop. Every day I check the weather up there, or I'm up there, and the grasses are green and tall, and it looks better than it ever has. And then the other units, I mean, it's not as much moisture in those units as for sure, but they both look really good too. There's still green grasses in both of those units where even in the desert, if you go out and look in the canyons, you'll find green grass where normally it's dead grass.
Well, that's good to hear. Unit 8 is one of those units it's kind of a fickle unit. I mean, it's hot or cold. It's one day it can be hot, one day it can be cold. It's been my experience in there, but it's one of those units that it can have some big bulls. That with Sycamore Canyon there with they can drop off in places where they can go hide a little bit, and there is some thick country. And
Yeah,
some giants have come out of there, and it's one of those units I feel like the last 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years probably it's kind of been the little stepchild a little bit of 9 and 10. Um, but I remember years ago it used to be it used to be a real contender, and I would argue that fairly low tag numbers and such. You know, at any given time, a giant could come out of there.
yeah. There's still great bulls in that unit, and like you said, there's some good hiding spots for them. And then once the rut hits, these big bulls just show up that have been hiding, in the pine trees or in the big canyons that you don't really see them the rest of the year. So, yeah, I've been up there a lot lately. I've already set a bunch of cameras and been glassing and looking for sheds and that type of stuff. So, that's what I've been focusing on for the past couple months actually.
Yeah, you guys had I believe it was last fall, you guys had a late season elk hunter. Um, I believe in Unit 7 East, that's historically not known for great bulls, and you guys killed just a whopper of a bull. Wondering if you could share that story with us. And then for the listeners, the Coues Deer nuts out there that are just dying to hear the Coues Deer stuff, we're going to hear some elk stories first, and then we'll get to the Coues Deer.
Yeah. All right, yeah. So last year, we had a client in 7 East for that late rifle bull tag, and I had been scouting it really hard, and I've been finding some pretty good bulls actually. A couple bulls over 350, and that we were actually planning on hunting. And then I got up there a couple days before the hunt, and I was out checking trail cameras and glassing, and I went to the far end, one of the far ends of the unit to go check a camera, and I was like, well, I'll check that camera once it gets dark. I'm gonna go hike up on this hill right now while there's still some light and glass and see what I can find. And ended up glassing up that big bull that we ended up shooting, and went down, checked the camera, had a bunch of trail cam pictures of him, knew that he was staying in that area. And so we put all of our eggs into that basket. Obviously, he's a giant bull, and judging from the video and the pictures I had from him, I figured he was going to be close to a 400-inch bull. And the first day of the hunt, we went out there and could not find him. I don't know. I think he was just bedded somewhere, then never got up to where we could find him. But I think it was the second or third day, one of my guys, Trevor, ended up glassing him up at like first light, and we were able to get the hunter who had actually been hunting. I think he'd been on like 15 elk hunts in his life, and he never able to kill a bull. So he just wanted a bull. That's all he wanted. He was from Missouri. He's like 63 years old, great guy, and he just wanted any bull. And
here you guys are grinding it out for this giant, and probably seeing some other bulls, and he's like, well, what about that one?
Oh yeah, yep, that was it. I know I just cut off right in the middle of that story, but I actually found a shed on that trip, and it was from like a 315 bull, and I'm like, hey Denny, he's like, dang, I'd really like to take that back to Missouri with me. And I'm like, well, you can take it back to Missouri with you if we don't shoot a big bull for you. And he just thought it was the biggest antler he had ever seen in the world. And I was like, yeah, it's a nice antler, but that's only about a 315 bull. And he was just blown away. So he just wanted any bull. And anyways, back to the story. Trevor glassed his bull up about 7 a.m. He came down the hill from his glassing spot and took the hunter with him on, I think it was about an 8-hour stalk. And that's something that I want to talk about with Coues deer and elk, is patience. This was a rifle tag. We were in a spot where we couldn't shoot from very far away. We had to get close to this bull. We had to play the wind, and we glassed the bull up at 7 a.m. and Trevor took the guy out, and we got up high and communicated through text message and kind of told him where the bulls were bedded. And he was able to get in close and waited out. And finally at like 3 p.m., the bull stood up and showed himself, and then they had to make a quick move. And then the hunter, Denny, made a great shot and dropped him. And he ended up being a 390-inch typical 6x6 bull in a unit that is not known for big bulls. There's like 550 tags in there at that time of year, and they just get knocked down every year. So
I remember when that bull was shot. I think you sent me a photo, and you were like, "It's like a 380." I'm like, that thing looks bigger than 380 if I remember right, and you were kind of downplaying it, and just a giant typical six. If you guys go on James underscore Dudley 12, you can see on James's Instagram account. There's a bunch of pictures, and then James Dudley Guided Hunts.com. There's a bunch of pictures of it, but that's just an amazing bull, beautiful, typical bull. It's got all kinds of character with the wavy main beams, and I love his eye guards, how much curl and character that they have, how much they tip up. I mean, his seconds look like they're 21 inches long or something. Just a heck of a bull, heck of a story, and so you glassed that bull up before you had even known that he was there, and then you went and checked the camera, and sure enough, you had pictures of him too. That had to be pretty rewarding in the fact that you glassed him up, then you go check cameras, and then you have photos right there to show, not only the hunter but your buddies and other guides, like, this is the real deal. I just saw him on the hoof, and
Yeah.
and we have trail cam, like, he's here.
Yeah, he was there, and he was actually, so I glassed him up, and then I went and I like to glass the last light no matter where I'm at, and then go deal with all the trail camera checking at night, just because there's nothing else you can really do. So as soon as I got there, I checked that camera, and he was on it the night before, and he was probably 300, 400 yards away from that camera. So, and I had pictures, from him hitting that camera for the past couple weeks. So I knew he wasn't going far. I knew that as long as nobody bumped him, there was a really good chance that we were going to find him during the hunt.
Couple questions I would have, when you got pictures of him on the camera, was he by himself or was he with other bulls? That's number one question.
Yeah, on the camera he was by himself.
Okay, so he was always by himself. And when
and
when,
until
when did you mainly get the
okay.
pictures of him? What
At
time?
night
What?
he was coming in and hitting salt at night, and nothing really during the day. I think I got a couple pictures from one morning, but he would come in at night and hit salt, and then go sleep all day.
Do you
And
think
then that
do you think him coming in at night was a function of him being a long ways away from there, or do you think it was more of a function of he was nocturnal and didn't move much, didn't move a lot? He wasn't far from the camera where the camera
yeah.
was, but he just didn't move. Is that what you think?
Yeah, he wasn't far. I know he never went too far. He stayed right around there, and would just come in at night, just because he was nocturnal. He would sleep all day, and come into the salt at night. And actually, he did end up meeting up with three other bulls. That day that we ended up shooting him, he was with a couple 5x5s and a smaller 6x6 that he was with all day while we were making that stock on him, which made it more difficult because, like I said, we did have to get close in order to actually get a shot on him.
When you guys actually got him shot and got him killed, did you have enough time to kind of look at the area where he was shot and see if, you could see all sorts of his tracks all around there, and that he was just really locked in on that spot, and that's where he was hanging out? And I guess
Yep.
where I'm going with that is, like, in that circumstance, potentially those bulls, they kind of like to just, those big bulls, I think, late, they don't move a lot. And if you can find those little pockets, a lot of time, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you could go back and find that bull's sheds right there.
Yeah, that's it exactly. He did not move. He wanted to stay right there in that spot. He knows that spot, and that's where he lived for that time of year. And that was actually one of my things I was going to talk about later on is the big bulls and Coues deer. I find them together in the same type of country and same canyons, and it seems like neither one of them really move a whole bunch um, during that time of year. Uh, and this guy, that's the way he was. Actually, once we killed that bull, a guy hit me up. A guy that lives in Flagstaff, and he had the sheds from that bull from the last year, and he knew exactly where. He could tell from the background of the pictures and stuff, but that guy's sheds were within a couple hundred yards of where we ended up killing him.
That's
From that
really
past
good
year.
information right there to, I think, for people to understand how small sometimes those core areas can be. And that's also one of those things that, guys out there that do a lot of shed hunting, I mean, if you find a really
Yeah.
good set of sheds, make sure you're glassing into those areas, and trying to find those bulls, because more than likely that's their home. And then certainly if you could find, a couple sets of sheds, or at least, one side or the other, I mean, you basically have thrown a blanket over his home, and you just got to, surround that, because more than likely, unless he got shot and, is in the back of a pickup going to Ohio or something, he's
Right.
going to, be right there. Very, very good stuff. So the sheds, were they from the year before? And I'm curious, how much growth from that year to the year you killed him did he put on?
So the guy that had the sheds, from, let's see, it would have been the year or whatever, that year before, had him at about a 370 bull, and then the year that we killed him, he was right at 390. So he put on like 20 inches
Where did you
that
see
last
it?
year.
Did you actually get to see the sheds, or just pictures of them?
Yeah, time length. Um,
So he
all of
put
his
on
tines.
times.
Yeah, yep. He actually had a kicker coming off of his fifth the year before, like 4 inches, and he lost that the year that we got him. But his tine length, he grew a lot in tine length that year that we got him. Um, and he just he was kind of a weird bull because of his time. His tines were so long. His main beams aren't that long. He's got a giant whale tail, like the huge whale tail, and then his mass wasn't what I thought it was. His mass isn't as big as it should be for a bull with crazy tine length like that, and that's where he didn't make the 400 because of his mass, and his main beams were not quite as long as I thought they were.
Just a beautiful, big, beautiful 6 point. It's funny how some bulls, his points are really long, but they look long because he's not super heavy.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
just amazing that a bull like that didn't break his points, as long as they are, and not a ton
I
of
know.
mass, just a beautiful six that, he made it through that whole rut and never broke a point. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Um, Awesome stuff. Good stuff. That gets my blood going. James, the main reason I wanted to have you on the podcast today is we've got the deer draw, um, for Arizona, is deer and sheep, coming out, or excuse me, is the deadline is Tuesday, June 13th, coming up here in a day or two, and I wanted to talk to you about Coues deer, and you are a Coues deer nut, and you specifically like Unit 21 and Unit 6A, and I, I would like to kind of break down both of those units, for listeners out there that either haven't hunted that either one of those units, or were interested in those units. If you could kind of break them down, and you can start with whichever unit you want, and I may pick away as you're talking about each unit and ask you questions about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start with 6A. There's two Coues deer hunts for the early season, and then there's the late rifle, which is December 15th through the 31st. The two early seasons, one has 150 tags, the other one has 125 tags. They're both 7-day seasons. First one's October 27th through November 2nd. And that one, if you have anywhere close to 3 or 4 bonus points, you should have a good chance of drawing it. I think 4 points is 100% for non-resident or resident. And let's see, the later hunt in December, that rut hunt, it looks like it takes 8 points, and 7 for residents, 8 for non-residents. And that late hunt, it says that there's a 60% success rate on the late hunt and a 30% success rate on those early hunts. And to me, that seems low for that unit. I think that that guys are spending too much time on the roads, up in the pine trees. The north end of 6A is pretty much flat pine trees and lots of roads. It's more mule deer country than Coues deer country. We like to hunt the south end of the unit. There's a bunch of big canyons that run into the Verde River. So my advice would be to get off the road and hike over at least one ridge and start glassing those big nasty canyons to the south end of the unit.
James, you bring up a good point there. 6A to me is one of those units. I know there's giant bucks in 6A, and I was kind of a little bit shocked to see you had brought it up. I knew we were going to be talking about 6A, and I hadn't really paid attention to it as of late. And to hear that there's the October hunt with only 150 tags, and then a second a November hunt with 125 tags, that seems like low tag numbers for a quality unit like 6A. And then you had already mentioned, I'm looking at the Go Hunt Insider draw odds, and it looks like that 6A late hunt with 8 points last year was a guaranteed for draw. The October hunt, it looks like 7 points was a guarantee and 3 points was a 58% chance. And then that November 10th hunt, it was with 3 points, it was a 50-50 shot of getting the tag, and 100% with 5. Pretty low tag numbers as far as 6A is a big, even if you say most of the Coues deer are in the southern part of the unit, 150 to 125 tags, even in the southern part of 6A, if you jammed everybody in there, there's a lot of country. I mean, that seems like a pretty, for the amount of big deer that are there, it seems like a pretty dang good quality hunt.
Yeah, it is. That whole southern half of the unit and the eastern half of the unit too. It's just great Coues deer country, and 6A is one of the biggest units in the state, square miles wise. And if you look just south of there into Unit 21, there's like 650 tags, I think, and then just up the hill in 6A, there's only 300 or 275, 350, something like that. Yeah. And so I think that those two early hunts are really underrated, I guess, just because there's so much land available and so little hunting pressure. And there's also 2 wilderness areas in 6A, Wet Beaver Creek and Clear Creek, and they both have a lot of hiking trails and good access points to get to the wilderness area, and you can actually glass very well from either one of those wilderness areas. There's trails you can hike and glass from. So I would recommend those two spots also.
Don't you think, you know, it's just a function of people, it would make a great backpacking unit, people that want to, get away for 2 or 3 or 4 days. There's actually quite a bit of water around. You could find a spring, you can find stock tanks, you could find water, and I'm surprised. It seems like that seems like a sleeper to me, because I know some of the big bucks giants over the years that have come out of there. For someone that's really wanting to work at it, I think there's definitely some diamonds in the rough there. 6A is a unit that you run some cameras in, you do some glassing, and you're familiar with, and you would love to take a client in 6A, right?
Oh, definitely. Last year we had a client in 6A, and we were on 100+ inch deer all day, every day. And it was kind of funny. We would have, one guy up top glassing towards this flat where there was a bunch of Coues deer hanging out on the flat, and we would one guide would go over with our client, and we would kind of communicate and tell them what the deer, if the deer are feeding or bedding or whatever. And these deer on this flat they're older age class deer, and they were smart. Um, there was one road that split the flat that they were living on, and you had to drive up this road in order to get to the flat. And there was a bunch of guys that would road hunt that road that would split that flat, and the deer would be out feeding in the wide open, and all of a sudden they would stop and look around like they're all nervous and trying to figure out why is he getting nervous? Why are all these deer getting nervous? And they could hear the rhino or the ranger coming up the hill, and before that ranger even got to the flat, they would literally walk 50 yards into this big huge grove, disappear. The rhino would drive right through within probably 40 yards of these deer, go down the other side of the flat, and then all the deer would come back out. This
Wow.
happened for like 5 days in a row. I was one up on the hill watching and glassing all this go on, and it got to be comical, because I would know somebody would be coming up that road before I could even see them or hear them or anything, just by the way the deer were acting. They would stop feeding and look directly over to where that quad was going to pop up, and they would hide before the quad even popped up onto the flat.
So was this hunt a December hunt?
This hunt was actually early archery. It was in the last week of August last year.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
that was an archery client. And one other thing about that hunt that was eye opening. Well, I always knew this, but it's just more proof that these Coues deer have this really tight, small home range. And a couple times we would be out on that flat chasing these deer, and they would catch wind of us, or we would jump one, or miss a shot or something like that, and spook them out of there. And one time I watched these deer, two big old bucks, run for probably a mile and a half, maybe even farther than that, just sprinting nonstop. They did not stop. And I'm like, well, that's the last we're ever going to see of those deer. They're never coming back. And not 10 minutes later, both of them were trotting straight back to the exact same spot where they just were. So they ran as far as they could for 5 minutes, stopped there for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, and realized that they didn't like it out there, and they trotted all the way back to like the same bushes that they had been hanging out in all summer, really.
That's really good information and observation there, and something that everyone should listen to, and the fact that we've heard it time and time again where guys have, and I talked about this on this last podcast with Dwayne Adams talking about Coues deer in southern Arizona units, and um, it's a great lesson that you think you spook bucks and they run off, but they're so habitual to their home range that more times than not, if you be patient, you're talking about a circumstance in 10 minutes. Um, but even the next day or the day after, don't give up on those deer, because where you see them usually is in their home range, unless you're talking about the rut where they're on a walk checking does and moving all around. If you see a big buck, the best place that you can look for him is sitting on the same rock or the same exact spot, and just stay focused on that area where I've talked about on this podcast. If you're a sheep hunter, I think the worst place to look for a big ram is the last place you saw them. Those rams are so nomadic, they move all over and they're never in the same spot. It's the exact opposite, I think, with these Coues deer. And even I would say some of those late elk, like that bull that you guys killed, on those late hunts, for whatever reason, those bulls, they find those places that are secluded. They find those places where they've got some, shelter and food and water, and they find a place they like, they find a place they can survive, and they stay there. They don't move around. They're smart enough to know that if they move too much, they're going to get killed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's a lot of similarities between a big bull and a big Coues deer. If they have water close by, and they're in a big nasty canyon, there's no reason for them to ever leave except for the rut. So if you can find a place that has a natural spring in a big canyon, in 6A or 21, one of those two areas, most likely there's going to be Coues deer right around there. They're going to live within a mile of these water sources, and a lot of times you'll find a big bull. If I'm glassing and I find a big bull out of the blue, and I know that that's where he's spending his winter, a lot of times a big buck will pop up in the exact same canyon. Just they hang out in the exact same type of terrain in the central Arizona.
I think it's one of those things that they require some of the similar things, and they feel safe. They feel safe in those pockets, and it just so happens that they commingle and they both feel safe in there. And I think that's a great observation that you bring to the table there. 6A, um, my interpretation of 6A, say on that last week of the December hunt, say Christmas on, because it's more northern and in it's one of the further north units with Coues deer in it. I could definitely see them acting a lot more ruddy in those
Yeah.
last 5 to 7 days, whereas maybe the southern Arizona units that are a little more south, typically they're not rutting till January, and I would even argue that 6A deer are rutting better in January. But I think with the right conditions, if you had cold, clear, crisp, real cold temperatures, with some snow and some different fronts coming in, I could sure see that last 5 to 7 days, seeing those deer act ruddy. Have you had any experience hunting them that late?
Yeah, I have. I actually shot a Coues deer with my bow a couple of years ago on, I think, December like 29th or 30th, something like that. And the deer that I shot him, he was checking his scrape line. He had a scrape line in that area, and I found it, and I set a blind up there. And sure enough, a few bucks came through, and they were moving all day. I had a camera set up there too, and if it gets cold, like you said, around Christmas, they can definitely start um, rutting behavior that last week of December. It's every year you can go out there and find deer that are acting ruddy for sure.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about 6A before we go move on to 21?
No, I think we covered it.
Okay, before we get to 21, I just want to take a second here and thank the sponsors of the podcast. I recently did an episode with the guys from GoHunt.com, and they have created the Go Hunt Gear Shop. And if you use the J Scott promo code when you sign up for an insider membership, you're going to get a $50 store credit at the Go Hunt Gear Shop. And they're carrying a bunch of hand-picked, field-tested gear, and you can go on their website, gohunt.com, and check it out. You also get free shipping. You get good technical support from the guys that are using the gear. Trail Kreitzer and some of the guys there at Go Hunt, you can actually call and talk to them on the phone about the gear. And it's a new thing that they're doing, and they actually have a surprisingly amount of great gear on their site. I encourage the listeners to go check it out. Not only is Go Hunt an incredible resource for draw odds, harvest statistics, finding hidden gem units, but now they're going to be able to offer a store for their insider members, as well as people that aren't insider members. But the beauty, if you're an insider member, is you actually, for everything you purchase, you get basically store credit, or you get reward points for everything you buy. And they have an example on there where you buy, basically two things, a sleeping pad and a pack, and you end up getting a sleeping pad for free by using your points. And they're in essence giving back to the insider members, giving that, instead of taking the profits from the resale of the items, they are giving that back, the rewards back to the members. So check it out. Use the J Scott promo code and get automatically a $50 store credit. I want to thank Coues Ultralight Hunting for their sponsorship of this podcast, and remind you that the Coues mobile showroom is actually traveling all around the western U.S. and the central U.S. and they are going to be in Spokane, Washington, June 15th through the 17th, Missoula, Montana, Boise, Idaho, Idaho Falls, July 6th through the 8th, Bozeman, Montana, the 13th through the 15th, and then Denver, Colorado Springs, Omaha, and a bunch of different cities. You can go on Coues.com to check them out. The Coues mobile showroom is going to have every single piece of Coues gear in every size, so you can go try on their boots, the new R Evolution boots, the Rebel Ks. You can go try and pack, see which pack size you are, see which size pack you like. Go try on all of the gear, and you can order the gear right there also. And I want to thank them for their sponsorship of the podcast. I also want to thank phonescope.com, Cheston Davis. If you use the JScott16 promo code, you're going to get 10% discount on all products there through phonescope.com. And the Outdoorsman's, Cody Nelson, they are the optics authority there in Phoenix. If you use the JScott promo code, you're going to get 10% discount. And Cody and his crew do an unbelievable job. They just got a bunch of BTXs in, I know, and Swarovski BTXs, as well as that new thing we're calling the hockey puck, which is a 1.7 magnifier. They're starting to get some of those in. So use the J Scott promo code there, and you guys are going to get 10% discounts. James, let's talk about 21. I've spent some time in 21. You really like Unit 21. What is it about Unit 21 that you like so much?
I started hunting it, I don't know, 12 years ago probably, just because it was close to my house and I knew that there was Coues deer out there. And that being said, there's a lot of different terrain in Unit 21. You have the desert floor. I've seen Coues deer down in the very bottom at like 2,000 feet elevation, all the way up to, I think the top of Squaw Peak is 6,000 feet. So the whole unit covers or holds Coues deer. I would stay away from the real flat stuff. But I mean, there's tons of country that people don't get into. It's rough country. There's big nasty canyons, and it seems like people don't really go back into that thick nasty stuff, and that it holds a lot of big deer. There's some big deer in 21.
There's dang sure some big deer in 21. Something that's interesting is this new structure where, October 27th through November 2nd in 21, there's 325 tags, and then November 3rd through November 9th, there's 325 tags. But then the late hunt in December, there's only 30 tags. And something Dar was pointing out the other day, my hunting partner is, they also have a mule deer hunt that goes on in 21, and it is, let me look here. It is November 10th through November 16th, and then there's also 10 mule deer tags that are the same time during that 30 tag, quote unquote rut hunt, December 15th to
Right.
the 31st. So, it gets a fair amount of pressure compared to the unit we were just talking about in 6A, but it
Yeah.
has a ton of country. I wouldn't say the densities, and I'm curious your opinion. I mean, it's a real pockety kind of unit. I mean, you get some country that looks really good and you can't find many deer, and then you'll find, pockets of them. It's not like a unit. I'm actually surprised they have as many tags as they do, because I feel like, that the amount of tags that they have compared to the amount of deer is lopsided. Now, obviously they're biologists and they know more about it than I do, but it seems like quite a few tags. But with that being said, it's still one of those units that's so rough, and this is my perspective, and then I want to get yours. It's so rough that there's always places that if you're willing to really hike and really work, that you can really find some good deer.
Yeah, that's the key to this unit is you have to hike. If you want to find big deer, you can always luck into one, but consistently, if you hike into these canyons, you can find big deer. I have one canyon that I hunt a lot, and in January this year, I hiked in there in the dark, spent the night, woke up at first light, and had four deer within 50 yards of my tent, and I ended up I didn't hunt. I just glassed that whole day from one spot. Ended up glassing over 40 deer, just in one spot in one canyon, and that for Central Arizona unit, that's a lot of deer for one canyon.
How were they
And
really rutting? Was it really,
yeah,
really
they were
active?
going crazy. This
What was the
canyon always
date?
has crazy deer.
What was the date of of it?
That was the middle of the month. That was probably the 12th, 13th, or 14th, something like that. And then that same canyon we spent a lot of time in, and they rut they rutted all the way through the end of the hunt. I mean, I was out there the last day of the hunt, or last day of January, and it was the same thing. They were going crazy all over the place.
Yeah,
But
it's
that being said, that canyon, I've hunted that canyon for 5 years, and I've never seen. It's a hike-in only canyon, and I've never seen not even a person, not anything, not a horse. I've never even seen a boot track back there. So ever in 5 years, and I'm back there constantly checking cameras and glassing, and people just don't get back that far.
and that's one of those
So
things that it has those areas that just people don't go. It's just too rough. It's too rugged. But it can have some incredible hunting, and it gets a ton of pressure. But there's still, like you said, you haven't even seen a boot track in 5 years, and that's one thing about 21 that I think is different than a lot of units, in that there is some stuff there that literally nobody goes into.
yeah,
And
oh yeah,
when you find areas like that, I think that's where you can find giant deer.
yeah. There's two hiking only wilderness areas: Cedar Bench and Pine Mountain Wilderness. Um, One time, this was probably 5 years ago. I didn't have a tag. I didn't know anybody that had a tag, and it was during, I think it was a weekend of the rifle Coues deer hunt, and I was going back into Pine Mountain to check a camera, and you got to take Dugas Road like 20 miles to get back up in there. And I probably passed 100 campsites, and rangers and rhinos and people all over the place. And I had one of my dogs with me, and I was like hesitant to even go hike around with my dog because there was 650 tags then, and I don't know, I don't like that many people out there at one time, and I was like, yeah, I'll be all right. I'll just stay on that trail, and I tied a bunch of orange to my dog's collar and um hiked into Pine Mountain 3 miles, checked my camera, hiked out 3 miles, and didn't see one person the whole time I was back there. And
That's
on
really neat.
Dugas Road, there was hundreds of people driving around.
Yeah.
So that just shows right there that if you want to ditch the people, you got to get off the roads. The Dugas Road and Bloody Basin Road are the two popular ones in 21. And yeah, there's Coues deer around there, but you got to get off that main road if you want to find them.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about access in 21. You mentioned the Dugas Road. You mentioned the Bloody Basin Road. Kind of explain to the listeners if they're not familiar. Kind of, you've got I-17 obviously running up the west side of the unit, but then tell the listeners several of the access points and even talk about the Pine Mountain Wilderness as well.
Okay. So most of the Coues deer in the unit are over by the Verde Rim, which is basically in the center of the unit. To get there, take I-17, and then you're going to have to take either Dugas or Bloody Basin east until you get back up into those that Verde Rim area. Even though there are Coues deer, that whole stretch from 17, 18 to 20 miles from I-17 over the Verde Rim, there's Coues deer all up along there. But if you want to get away from the people, the best thing to do is hunt the downward side of that Verde Rim. I mean, once you can get back there, there's nobody else back there.
You're talking about dropping off towards Camp Verde.
Yeah, dropping off towards Camp Verde, or you can come in from that Camp Verde side. There's a couple roads that you can find that will get you back over there, or um, drop in off Bloody Basin or off Dugas, or even come up through Seven Springs, and you can access that backside of that Verde Rim that way, and have way less people out there just because it's a lot harder to get to. But
I mean, we're talking some of these roads, they're maintained, county main. I don't know if they're county maintained or Forest Service maintained, but they scrape them every once in a while. But we're talking about teeth rattling,
yeah.
jarring every vertebrae in your back loose type of,
Yeah.
potholed roads. Um, and that's the thing. Even like those, we're talking about deer hunts in 21, but you get those elk hunts in 21. It's just so hard to get around, not because there's not roads, it's just the roads are not, there's those big malapai rocks, and it's just a
Yep.
challenge because it'll just rip your vehicle apart. But I
Brutal.
think places like that and units like that are not the country club of, you know, getting around and hunting, it's you can find some big deer. I mean, Dar's 10-year-old boy Paul, his first Coues deer he ever shot, was a 121-inch deer that was shot in Unit 21. And it's definitely a unit if you put in a lot of work, you can be rewarded. You can also go and hunt and hunt and hunt and not find the buck you want too. I mean, it's a pockety unit. You talk about 40 deer in one canyon. That's not the norm. But
No,
certainly
no,
when you
no.
do find those pockets, so it seems like they're once you find if you find the deer, it seems like they're there.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about this year is, they split it up into these two hunts. And if I had my choice, I would take that first October 27th through the 11th, or through November 2nd tag, just because those deer will not have been pressured yet. But I really do like the fact that they split the tag numbers into two hunts, because it used to just be a zoo out there. It was a mess.
Yeah, and I'm looking for non-residents in Unit 21, and now this is just talking about last year when it was just the October hunt. Um,
Right.
it was basically 100% chance to draw. Now they've
Yeah.
split it into two hunts. It's going to be interesting what that does with the odds because they basically, I think it was 600 tags for the the one early hunt. They've split it into two. We talked about this on the podcast with Dwayne Adams, and I did a podcast with the Arizona Ground Pounders, and they were talking about 22 and 23 also having this same three hunt structure. And from a guide or outfitter's perspective, it's great because you have the opportunity to take an October hunter, a November hunter, and a December hunter, and it creates more opportunity. And somewhat, I can see from a hunter's perspective how you know they can put in for say October 21, or 22, and then put in third, fourth, fifth. They can have a bunch of choices. The one thing I would say is that you get a new group of gung ho hunters back to back weeks, and I think it's going to put a little bit more pressure on the resource rather than I would rather have 600 tags in one hunt. Talking from just kind of like trying to, give the deer a break type of mentality. Most guys hunt a day or two and then they go back to the valley and they're done. Whereas this is you have two groups of 325 people that are the first group's gung ho, and then then maybe they go home after 2 or 3 days, but then all of a sudden 4 or 5 days later another hunt starts and you've got a whole nother group that's gung ho, ready to fired up. I, I think it's gonna I think it's probably not going to be great for the animals. But certainly the areas that you're talking about, James, that are, you know, way back in there and a good hike, I think what it's going to do is give opportunities for guys like yourself, um, and, and other hardcore hunters that, want to get a tag that's reasonably easy to draw. They're going to be able to, probably shoot a good buck every year because they're going to really be able to work at it, but they'll be able to draw it.
Yeah, I think that them splitting it this year like that, a lot of people are gonna be putting in for that first tag, and that the second tag is gonna be pretty easy to draw just because of what you just talked about. Um, but that being said, I wouldn't like shy away from that second tag either, just because of all the Coues deer behavior that, yeah, I mean, you've talked about on this podcast. We kind of went over it earlier too, that they do stick around in the same area, even if people are out there tromping around shooting at animals for a few days or a week. If they don't get the buck thereafter, there's a good chance the buck is still going to be in that area. So if you do scout um, 21 or 6A and you find some bucks, you have that second tag. Um, that pressure might make these bigger bucks go nocturnal, where they're only coming out for the last half an hour of light and going to bed really early in the morning. But I still don't see them
Leaving.
disappearing from their home range.
Yeah. I I think one of the benefits for the second hunt, you've got your October hunt and then you've got what I call the second hunt. I think it's November 3rd in this 21. Potentially it's a week or so later. There's a chance that the temperatures might be a little cooler. That's one benefit that I can see for that second hunt is, it's just a little bit later in the year and a little bit better chance that, potentially most of the time temperatures in November are a little cooler than they are in October. So from a hunter's, pleasant or pleasure, a little more pleasurable time, I think that second hunt's going to be better than the first hunt. I think, like you said, one of the benefits of that first hunt is always if you can do your homework and scout, and even if you can't scout, if you can hike into an area, you're going to get first crack at those bucks. So, the cream might be taken off the top a little bit on that first hunt. Um, but I think if you for guys that really know what they're doing, I think you can kill a good buck on the first, the second, or that third hunt.
Yeah, I think so too. Definitely.
This year, if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the first year that they have that 21 mule deer 10 tags at the same time. Is that am I right?
They had it last year too.
Okay.
So last year and then this year. I don't know if they're going to keep it. Normally, I think they used to have it over in 22 and 23, and then they stopped that last year and kind of moved it over to 21 for these 2 years.
I gotta be
Um,
honest, I think that would be an incredible tag, 10 mule deer
it is.
tags. Those deer will definitely be, rutting. They tend to rut a little bit earlier than the Coues deer. Curious your thoughts on, do you think they'll be rutting a little bit better than the Coues, and do you think it's a pretty good tag?
Yeah, that's funny that you say that because that's I put in for two choices this year, and it was a 13B rifle tag and that 21 December tag, just because I love hunting 21, and I know there's some giant muleys in there. So yeah, that's a great tag. I mean, there's only 10 tags. Um, the draw odds on that are, I think yeah, right here it says it's going to take. Last year it took 8 points for resident and 9 points for non-resident to get that tag, which still seems low. Oh, that's the Coues deer. Never mind.
Yeah, because
Might want to
I
edit
believe
that.
I believe it's okay. I believe this is the first year they've had that hunt in there, so I don't think they actually have the numbers for it.
Oh,
Um,
right. Yep.
but that's kind of a sleeper hunt, I think, because there are some, there's not giant mule deer. I mean, but for desert bucks,
Right.
there's some nice deer in there. If I remember right too, there's no archery hunt in 21 in December as well. Let me verify
That's
that.
correct. Yeah, no, that's correct. There's only those 30 rifle Coues deer tags and then those 10
Yeah.
rifle mule deer tags.
Yeah, so I think the late hunt in there, both for the mule deer and the coos, could be good. Uh, One question I would have for you is you run a lot of trail cameras in that country. Um, what do you see as far as patterns with those bucks once they get out of velvet? As far as do they continue to come in and hit your cameras, or do you have a void there where they don't come in for a while? Um, Curious what kind of patterns you've noticed as far as, do they go nocturnal, or do you get, bright sunshine and they're just standing there at 10 o'clock in the morning? What kind of pattern can people expect once they're out of the velvet?
Yeah, yeah, when they're in velvet, they're hitting salt all the time, and then, like you're saying, as soon as they rub, they kind of disappear a little bit. Um, Coues deer are different. They still get up and go walk around a little bit in the middle of the day, go get some water. They'll come hit salt, but they definitely lay low after they rub. They're harder to find. So I mean, they're still in the area. They still hit the salt. They still go get water in the middle of the day, but it just seems like they're not as active as in August.
How much of that do you think is a function of, when there's bone growing on their head, they like going and getting a drink, and it's, hotter, obviously, and they like licking that salt, but it seems like as soon as they know that that bone, is hardening up and they're not growing bone, it seems like they immediately pull off the salt. And it's just funny how you hear everybody say the
I
same
know.
thing, that their observation is that same thing. But, a lot of people think, oh, the deer left. And I think you make a great point. it's just not coming to the salt, or it's
Yeah.
just not coming to the water as much.
Yeah, like the winter months, um, I mean, the Coues deer will still come hit the salt, but not like an elk or anything. That they'll just come and mess around and smell stuff for a little while, whereas an elk will sit there for days and just lick all of your salt. But um, yeah, I don't know why they do that, but I've noticed it, and I know that a lot of other Coues deer hunters notice the same thing.
I want to ask you a question, put you on the spot a little bit. I know that the trail camera thing has been big, and a lot of people talking about the Game and Fish potentially doing something, and I've kind of gone on record here on the podcast saying I think they need to do something in the strip units and maybe unit 9 for elk in those high traffic areas where you've got your Game and Fish trick tanks, and you've got 10, 12, 15 cameras on the fence. But it would, in my mind, it would kind of be a shame to ban trail cameras altogether. Curious. Well, let me back up. I think it would be a bad deal to ban them altogether, because there's a lot of guys like yourself that are in some of these central Arizona type units or even southern Arizona type units that are walking a long ways going and finding these springs, these little puddles of water and things that you're not interfering with anybody else's hunt. And that's where my thing with trail cameras comes up, is when it starts interfering with other people's hunts, that's where we need to say, have we gone too far? But circumstances where I know you run trail cameras and you run them in, places 2, 3, 4, 5 miles in the middle of nowhere, where nobody even knows where your camera is. No, you never see another person. Um, to me, it seems like it would be sad if they did eliminate trail cameras. What's your thoughts on trail cameras? You don't have to agree with me, by the way.
Right. So I enjoy everything about trail cameras. I am a glutton for punishment. The other night, I had a 102-pound pack. Myself and my hunting partner packed salt and cameras back into one of these canyons and spent the night in the dirt and
Just a
hiked more.
miserable night with the
Oh
bugs
yeah,
buzzing you and
bugs.
scorpions crawling in your
Yeah,
bags and everything
yeah,
else.
exactly. Bugs, thermocells, me spraying my face with bug spray in the middle of the night, all that stuff. Wake up and go hike some more and set out salt and trail cameras and all that stuff where nobody is ever going to mess with them or go find them, or I'm not going to bother anybody else by doing it. So, and there's nothing better than going and checking a trail camera that actually works right and you have a bunch of great pictures on there. It's the closest thing to Christmas morning for a kid that I'm ever going to, deal with in my lifetime. So I love trail cameras. That being said, I specifically avoid those um, big big units where there is an issue with them. I mean, I don't have an issue with them because I don't go out there. I don't guide there. I don't. I've very rarely even gone into those units, just because of the competitiveness, and I don't. That everybody else can have them. I don't. I don't need all that. I'm doing this for fun. So not. I don't know what the right answer is. I think there's some guys out there saying that pull them down before the season starts in these certain units. I think that sounds like a good idea, but I mean, for me to comment and have my own opinion on it when I don't even hunt out there, I don't know. I just hope that nothing affects the entire state because it's not an issue throughout the entire state.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, I think we need to just watch and maybe figure something out on these higher impact areas, and come to a reasonable solution, and hopefully there's no ban statewide or anything like that. You had brought up something before the podcast started that you wanted to mention. That was leftover tags, and I think that's something that never gets talked about. What's your thoughts on leftover tags, and you wanted to remind people about?
Okay. Yeah. Every year there are leftover first come first serve rifle Coues deer tags, and they're always in southern units in Arizona for different hunts. I've participated in these hunts the past couple of years, and both times gone down there and taken actually first time hunters into these hunts with a leftover tag and found Coues deer right off the bat. Found a bunch of bucks, got some shots. Kid had a great time. Another first time hunter had a great time. Um, the only problem is access down there. Like Dwayne Adams said in the last podcast, there's some of these units that you really have to study in order to get back up into the Coues deer country. But if you don't get drawn for what you put in for, you can always buy a leftover rifle Coues deer tag. And there's a lot of national forests down there. I would say that you just find a national forest in that unit that you buy the over the counter tag for and find a direct way into that national forest, because every gate down there is locked. Just because you see a road on a map, it's going to be locked. So if you find an actual way to get into that national forest, just go there, park, and start hiking, and um, get up high in glass. And I mean, there's plenty of deer down there, so um, it's just a thing that I'm surprised more people don't take advantage of it. And on those hunts, they're leftover because nobody wants them. And I mean, I've gone down there to 30A and 30B, glassed up tons of Coues deer, some nice bears, and there's nobody else out there. It's kind of surprising that nobody takes advantage of those.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. We've covered a lot of ground today, 6A and 21. We've talked about some elk. We've had a good podcast. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some of your knowledge with us. I want to give you a chance to let the listeners know where they can hear about your guide service, where they can follow along. I encourage them to do so. I've known James for a couple years now and really enjoy following him on Instagram. And I know you do a great job for your clients. And so, James, why don't you tell people where they can learn more about you?
Okay, yeah, I have my website is jamesdudleyguidedhunts.com. I have a Facebook page, same thing, James Dudley Guided Hunts. And my Instagram is probably my favorite thing to do. And that is James Dudley _12. And you can message me on any of those, or my phone number's out there. So contact me if you have any questions about hunts and anything in Arizona, and I can point you in the right direction.
I gotta bust your chops a little bit.
Oh no.
There was some pictures floating around there for a time that the beard had been shaved off.
Oh yeah.
Is the beard back? Is it back in action?
All right, so it's back. It's just not as crazy as it used to be.
It's not Duck Dynasty length.
No, it's not. I cut my hair. All right, so here's the story on that. You kind of hinted at it earlier.
I was trying to pick at it.
I know, but I travel for work. I install radiation therapy machines for cancer treatment, and so that's how I get so much time off. I'll work for a week, be off for a week. That being said, I used to grow my hair out until it was long enough to donate it. And so I would grow it out till it's like 12, 13 inches, cut it off, and do it all over again. And I would do that with my beard too, basically, just not get a haircut or shave my beard for like a year and a half, and then cut it all off and do it all over again. So this time in December, I cut it all off, donated the hair, and just was kind of sick of being a hair farm. So right now I have a little beard and short hair, and that's much better for the for the summer in Phoenix, Arizona.
I was gonna say if when you're on those long Coues deer hikes overnight with 100-pound packs, at least you could pull the if you got full beard, you could pull all that hair over your face, and then they can't even find you. But
Yeah,
now you're almost for you clean shaven and short hair.
I know, I know. Hey, I guess I'm growing up. I don't know. Hey Jay, one more
Well,
thing, if I could.
yeah,
All
yes.
right. So the other night I was out checking cameras in 6A and I found a dog. Um, it's somebody's pet. I thought it might have been a hunting dog, but I asked around that community and nobody seems to think it is. Check my Instagram. There's a picture of him on there, a couple pictures. Um, it's somebody's pet. He's at my house and he's making a mess of it. So I already have 3 dogs. I don't want 4 dogs, and I need to find his owner or a new home for him. He's a really good dog, but if people can help me out there, look at Facebook or Instagram, and there's pictures of this dog that I found uh, close to
Yeah, and he's
Stillman
got
Lake
something
Road.
in his mouth. Doesn't he have something in his mouth?
It's probably he had a big
Looks like he's
leather
chewing
collar
on one
on
of your Swarovski eye cups or something.
him. No, all of my optics are up very high in a closed cabinet right now because you should see what he did to all 4 dog beds.
I'm
My house is
sure. He's
covered
got
in
that look in
foam.
his eye.
I know. I need to
I,
go
I
check on
just
him
want to
right
be
now.
clear. I think you had said, I just want to be clear. I think you misspoke on your Instagram handle. It's James underscore Dudley 12.
Yes,
And I
sir.
believe you said, I think you said James Dudley underscore 12, but just in case, it's James underscore Dudley 12.
Thanks. Yeah, I always get that wrong.
Okay. All right, buddy. It was great having you on. Wish you the best of success this summer in your scouting, and uh, hope you get some good, tags yourself for deer, and hopefully get a client or two for deer. And hope you guys bang them up on those elk hunts as well. And look forward to seeing your success. And yeah, God bless you, buddy. And I'll see you down the road. Okay.
All right, you too. Thanks a lot, Jay.
All right. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.